Hello, I'm back with a new video on the new Kadampa tradition. It's been a little while since I last made a video. And so today I thought to talk about this structure of a cult, like what kind of a structure does a cult have, and how the NKT works from this point of view. And the reason I decided to talk about this is because we have so many NKT members who come into the exposing group on Facebook, the current NKT members, and they're always saying, well, whatever you're saying here is not my experience. I have a really different experience. I have a really good experience. And I actually believe that, I believe these people who are saying they have a different experience and that their experience is generally a positive one. I think only partially can you explain this difference with being, brainwashed or influenced by the NKT. And I think another reason is that your experience in the NKT will greatly depend on a number of different factors. And one factor is like where you are in the NKT exactly. So cults have been compared to onions. So a cult is a little bit like an onion. It's got, different layers. And it means that there is the outer layer and then there's several layers. And the closer you are to the core of the onion, the more the deeper your experience will be. And the experience of the people who are on the outer edges of the cult, of the group, is not going to be the same as the experience of the people who are further in or at the very core of the group. So actually, I read something very interesting about this, where they were saying that the onion analogy is also used to describe the human mind in these environments. Like members' authentic original identity is buried under years of emotional and intellectual conditioning, requiring time and help to safely peel back. So when you spend enough time in a cult-like environment, in a group like the NKT, your mind is going to have layers and layers on top of that original mind with which you entered the group. And those layers are going to be manifestations of the kind of influence that you have been under over the years. There is the outer layer, which is basically the front of the organization. This is the public outreach that looks perfectly normal and just simple teachings and workshops and meditation classes in the NKT, cafes, whatever. And then once you enter the group and you go through that first layer, you might actually not go further than that. A lot of people just stay on the outer layer for whatever reason. They're just happy there to take part in some of the teachings, sometimes maybe a festival, and that's it. They don't do anything else. But some people go a little bit further deeper and get into the middle layers where there are much stricter rules and there's much more isolation from your friends and family, and there's also increased financial commitment. And then finally, there would be the central part of the group, which is where the unquestioned authority lies and where the most radicalized members of the group reside, the leaders and the higher ups and the most the most radicalized members of the cult. Okay, and also the leader, the guru himself, whether dead or alive, but he's somehow sitting there in the center. So I'd like to see in this video how this actually plays out in the NKT. In the New Kadampa tradition, there are four major layers. The first layer is the outer layer, the outreach layer. The second layer is the soft core. Third layer would be the hard core. And the fourth layer would be the core itself. So let's see how this actually works. So the first layer, which we call the outer layer, this is what you see from the outside. This is what is presented in the NKT's publicity and marketing campaigns and material. And this is designed to look like a secular, highly accessible and stress-relieving mental health resource group. And so there is a very strong branding there, which strangely avoids the word New Kadampa tradition. And we already talked about that, why. But instead of saying New Kadampa tradition, they just use very generic names like Meditation Center, maybe Kadampa Meditation Center, Modern Buddhism, World Peace Cafes. There are all kinds of hooks with which the people are hooked in and enticed into these very wonderful and lovely events. I must say that they're quite nice, and there are also drop-in classes at this level. So they offer these very affordable public drop-in classes which focus on modern Buddhism and mindfulness meditation and overcoming anxiety, how to deal with difficult people. So all kinds of issues that we all are dealing with every day. That's actually how I got involved with the NKT. I was just interested in learning how to meditate, and that's how I showed up on their doorstep. So the second layer is the soft core. It is the foundation program, basically. So once a casual practitioner shows regular interest, they're guided into the systematic study programs. And so the program, the foundation program, or FP for short, encourages students to enroll in this program. It's a formal program which requires signing a contract committing to regular attendance and homework and exams. So this is like the first serious commitment that Kadampa practitioner is going to make. And this is also, I think, a test. It's the organizations. It's really not actually necessary. Like anyone who's interested in Buddhism and just increasing a little bit of like peace and happiness in their lives, it's not actually necessary to sign a kind of an agreement and commit to a regular program. You could just go on your own and make a decision on your own when you are going to go to these programs and these teachings and participate. But so this is I think the first test sort of that the NKT puts you under, and to see your potential probability of commitment to the group, like how likely you are to commit to the group. Okay, and at this point already the information control is quite strong. So at this layer, the circle of information tightens significantly, because students are discouraged from reading external literature. And this is like a subtle discouragement. It's not a prohibition. I mean, again, often people say, oh, we can read whatever we want. No one told me not to read anything else. No, it's not a very open, clear prohibition, but it's a subtle discouragement from reading other books outside Castle and Gyatso. So you can certainly not bring in other books or discuss other authors within the walls of an NKT center. So only books written by Castle and Gyatso are studied and allowed inside the center. So there's also a subtle isolation at this point. Like once you've started your foundation programs, students are also encouraged to start volunteering, helping more, cleaning the centers, transcribe the talks, run the cafes. And so this sort of, more and more volunteering slowly replaces their outside social life with the NKT. So the third layer is the hardcore. That's the teacher training program. It's almost inevitable that students who have participated in the foundation program will be bitten by the NKT virus of becoming a teacher within the NKT and channeling Geshe-la and Geshe-la's teachings. So this layer represents a deep shift from standard Buddhist practice to intense institutional devotion. So at this layer, people commit even more towards the organization itself rather than the Buddhist tenets or ideas or teachings. So promising students enter the teacher training program, or TTP, and unlike traditional Buddhism, which requires decades of rigorous scholarship to teach, the NKT quickly fast-tracks these Western students into teaching roles. Apparently, the teacher training program is only 6 months long, and they usually just study one Kelsang Gyatso book, and that will make that particular person qualified, according to the NKT, to teach Buddhism within the NKT. That student, mind you, is going to be also prohibited from teaching NKT material or Buddhism, Kadampa Buddhism, anywhere else outside the NKT. So students at this stage, at the hardcore stage, are often or frequently encouraged to move into the residential centers. They're often advised to cut ties with unsupportive family and friends, being told that non-NKT relationships are toxic distractions to their environment. And also, TTP members often work long hours running the multi-million-dollar NKT real estate empire for little or no pay, driven by the belief that the free labor creates spiritual merit. So that is basically this layer 3 is the layer is where the people are exploited, and that's the majority of the people that actually carry the weight of the NKT organization and create the profit for the NKT by doing volunteer work and also by teaching classes where people are paying good money to participate in. So they're making money for the NKT, they're making cash, there's a cash flow through these people in layer 3, but there's also their other types of volunteer work, which we have already mentioned. So the innermost layer, the core of the organization, would be the most radicalized members and the members in the highest position of the organization. So this would be this would actually be the core of the onion. So there's a complete psychological subjugation to the organization and its specific ideology. There's this one thing in the NKT that's really typical of this organization, and that is rapid ordination. Sometimes ordination takes as long as 2 months. I knew someone who came into, I saw him when he started attending. 2 months later, a few months later, maybe not 2, maybe 3 or 4, but just a few months later, he was an ordained member. He was a monk. And I was like, wait, what? What's going on here? Why is that necessary? Why does someone have to ordain in a few short months? It's fairly typical. Actually, the NKT is famous for its rapid ordination. Some people take longer, some people take years. But it's very quick, it's very easy to ordain and become a nun and a monk in the NKT. So they're also heavily encouraged to take robes as monks and nuns, because if you take the robes, it's much easier to the organization to manipulate you and to give up your original identity and just become a slave, become a robot. And the ordination is performed directly through the NKT rather than traditional lineage channels. And what happens here is that the ordained members become entirely financially and socially dependent on the group because they do not belong to a wider Sangha. There is no financial help coming to them. So they absolutely must work for the center in order to make sense of their existence. There are some ordained members who kind of decide to live outside the centers, but it's really difficult because, you can't walk around in your robes in a normal society. People would not understand, people wouldn't, it just basically doesn't work. So I know actually monks and nuns who are ordained to this day, but they never wear their robes because it's just doesn't make any sense unless they are in some center. Also, at this core level, members are introduced to the mandatory practice of Dorje Shugden. So Dorje Shugden is this highly controversial protected deity or mean spirit, depending on how you choose to look at him. And members are taught that Shugden is an enlightened being who will fiercely punish anyone who mixes NKT teachings with any other form of Buddhism or spiritual practice. So originally, Dorje Shugden was the protector of the Gelug sect, and now in modern days, his popularity is waning, and he's become this protector saint, so to speak, this protector spirit of the New Kadampa tradition. And then, the final layer requires absolute, unquestioning obedience to the founders. So Kelsang Gyatso is viewed not just as a teacher, but as a living Buddha. Any critical thought, doubt, or psychological struggle is blamed entirely on the member's own negative karma or delusions. And it's never the mistake of the NKT, also because the NKT is Geshe-la, as they say. The NKT is Kelsang Gyatso. So if you criticize the NKT as an organization, you are actually criticizing Geshe-la or Kelsang Gyatso, the guru, the founder. And that is obviously a big problem. And so people at the core, they don't do that. They don't criticize, they don't question. They just go ahead and implement whatever it is that needs to be implemented in order for the organization to survive and thrive. So a lot of the people in our group on Facebook come from the inner layers of the organization. They share their personal experiences from that position. And then the other people who come in, the visitors who are NKT members, are on the outer layer of the organization. So they don't see this sort of work or manipulation that goes on in the background, and they don't understand what we're talking about, and they don't believe us. They don't believe the survivors when they say, well, this is what happened and this is what's going on, and they just take everything that the NKT shows them as fact. This is it. This is just a wonderful place. And like I said, if you are on that outer layer, that part of the NKT that is visible to the outside world, the public outreach layer, then yes, it's cafes and cookies, and we meditate a little, and we sing songs, and we sit around in the garden or in some lovely cafe, and it's cool, it's fun, but that's not what the NKT is about. And so I would like to thank you for your attention this time. I wanted to talk about this onion thing for a long time. This thing about the onion actually comes from Hannah Arendt. She first described totalitarian cultures as an onion, and so this whole metaphor comes from Hannah Arendt. It's not my invention, or it's not a very recent invention, but I think it's genius because it makes you really understand why the different people's experiences are so incredibly different. And just because you are having a great experience because you go to your local center like twice a month and it's all beautiful and wonderful for you, it doesn't mean that the people who are talking about their experiences that are completely different, who have been in a completely different part of the organization, is a lie or wrong, or that these people are angry or frustrated and they're just venting. They're not venting. We're talking about stuff that's real and that's important. So because you have a good experience, it does not invalidate other people's bad experience, right? It's pretty obvious to me. Anyway, thank you so much for your attention, and I'll see you next time.